Hey guys, welcome back to yet another YouTube video. And since the AFL home and away season has now ended, and of course finals is now of course around the corner, that being of course next week, I've decided to do a season review of teams from ninth down to 18th, that teams that are not going to play finals this year. I originally was going to do like a two-part thing where I chat about some teams in one part, and then the second part chat about the other half of the bottom half of the table of the ladder. But I decided that I decided to just do one by one. So of course I'm going to go backwards to 18th, 17th. By the way, Essendon will be last, and oh boy, don't I'm hyping this up. Don't prepare for when I get to come around to that, because that's going to be absolutely me at my fieriest, to be honest. Of course, because I'm an Essendon supporter, and member. So yeah. So for this first I don't know if you call this episode. The first team I'm going to review is, of course, we're going down from the bottom or up to ninth. So, of course, North Melbourne. So, last year, of course, they finished the Wooden Spooners last year, obviously. This year, the Wooden Spooners again. But only this time they had a coaching change 3/4 of the way through the season. Of course, they ended it with only the two wins, which the two wins were fellow dwellers West Coast in round 2, and then in round 18, against Richmond, who are going to be playing finals in a couple of weeks. So it has really I expected them this season to have a big jump this season. Not a big jump, but a jump nonetheless. But of course it just proved it's sort of disappointing season. Of course, David Noble getting the sack, and then of course Adams taking over, and then obviously the appointment of Alistair Clarkson, which we'll talk about in a bit. So first of all, let's talk about the highlights from the season. So obviously it was the wins, obviously against the win against West Coast, which was a pretty good win. The other one was the round 17 loss against Collingwood, which they only just got pinned by just over a goal. Nobody even realised that. I think North Melbourne led for about almost all the game, but Collingwood picked them late, which they weren't the only team that got pinned. They got pinned by the Maggies. In those Maggie pricks, you could tell I hate Collingwood. So yeah. And I remember that week was filled a pressure-filled week for David Noble. I mean, his job was questioned, unfortunately, at the end of that week, the next week, which leads to, of course, the Richmond game. He got the sack. He got the sack after losing 14 straight games, and some of which were losses, so were very bad, to be honest. And then of course Richmond. Again, just like Collingwood, but this time it was a lot different. They led for most of that game, and then but then they were behind at some stage. I think it was in the last quarter, and everybody thought, "Here we go again." But then Cam Zurhaar decided to take matters into his own hands, kicked the 6-pack of goals, and the game was over. So yeah. Another highlight was, of course, the comeback of Ben Cunnington. I mean, we'll talk about Sam Doherty when we get to Carlton later in another when I review Carlton. But those two are probably the two most inspirational players in the AFL at the moment. I mean, Cunnington coming off to, of course, he had diagnosed with testicular cancer. Then he came back, and then it came back again, and then now he's come back to playing AFL again. So I hope for Kangaroos fans, I hope for Ben's own sake that he basically that this is the end of all the testicular cancer stuff. It's of course for fans back in the 60s and 70s. Of course, Peter. Of course, we all know what happened to Peter. Hawthorn fans know in the 60s and 70s what happened to Peter Crimmins. Obviously, he had testicular cancer. Like I think it was like 2 or 3 times. I think it was, but then the third time it really got him. And unfortunately passed away, ironically, 3 days. I think 3 days after the 1976 grand final. So I hope for Ben's sake, for his family's sake, and for North Melbourne fans' sake, that this is the end for of all the testicular cancer stuff, and hopefully he's healthy for at least for the rest of his football career, and hope he doesn't need to retire because having that cancer come back again. And the two games he played really well in too. So yeah. And then, of course, most recently, as we all know, Alistair Clarkson, they had signed him on as coach. It was rumours. It was all everywhere that Clarkson and it was basically Clarkson, North Melbourne all the time, until recently when there was rumours that possibly Essendon would enter in the race, but it didn't happen to get him, but it didn't happen. So North Melbourne, and of course today, as I'm recording this, I think the Kangaroos footy boss and someone else has been shown the door as the first sign of the Clarkson era has well and truly begun at North Melbourne. So yeah. So yeah. And also, if talking about something else, also, the talk about, of course, when the week obviously of them getting Clarkson, and then when it got smashed by the Gold Coast Suns last week, Kane Corns openly came out on Footy Classified on Monday, said that called Sonia Hood, who's of course I think is the CEO of North Melbourne, or chairman of North Melbourne. Something, I think it's the CEO of North Melbourne. Something called a victory lap, which is true, because they've just, I know they've gotten probably the greatest coach in the 21st century. I know that, but the way that North Melbourne fans carried on, it was like they won the flag. And I agree with what Kane said. He agree. I just instantly agree with him and say, yeah, they've celebrated like they've won the premiership. The day, they'll probably eat more words, and then basically we get all us doubters probably eat our words and say, and basically they, basically contend for finals, but these things do not work out. These things do not work out. When I heard that they signed him on a 5-year deal, I thought, this is a bit strange. because remember back to 2001 with the Malcolm Blight St Kilda situation. I think they signed him on I think it was a 2-year deal worth $1 million a year, and I'd assume that will be the same thing. I won't be surprised that's the same thing with Clarko. I won't be surprised because obviously he, as I said, he is the coach of the 21st century right now. So obviously he's going to be worth that money. Of course, Malcolm Blight has just come in 2001. Malcolm Blight came off with 2 plays in 3 years with with Adelaide Crows in 97 and 98. So obviously he was. He obviously was owed that money. It was worth that money. Sorry, that's the one I was looking for. Worth that money. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. I mean, he only won 3 of his 15 games and got the sack mid-season, and so it's proved that getting the best ever coach with a struggling club sometimes works, but that proved then that sometimes it doesn't work. So I'm still a bit jury's out about Clarkson at North Melbourne, to be honest. It might prove a success or it might be a fail. I don't know. I don't know really, but yeah. So and then now let's go to the lowlights or the low light, and that is the pretty damning statistic that they had. Out of the 20 losses that they had, 15 of those losses, that is 3/4 of their losses had been by 46 points or more, and 8 of those losses by 10 goals or more, and that is pretty damning. I mean, about what Kane Corn said about North Melbourne fans celebrating like they won the premiership when they got Clarkson, and then obviously to serve that up when they got smashed by the Suns to the tune of 67 points. There's still a long way to go with them. I mean to have that they have to be one of the worst. This is probably one of the worst teams probably in the 23rd since the start of the millennium in 2000. Obviously, that is probably that bad. Obviously, North Melbourne. We were all wondering at one stage maybe were they going to be stuck on just that solitary win against West Coast. Then the Richmond game came along, and yeah, so yeah, and then obviously against sides like games like against sides that are in the top 4 like Geelong, like Geelong, Melbourne, those type of losses were of course were expected really because they were at the top at the pointy end of the ladder. But against teams like fellow teams like GWS, they got smashed by them to the tune of 49 points. Against Essendon, probably are in a worse situation than them at the moment. So that is probably that at the moment probably. And yeah, they still got, as I said, they still got a long way to go, and Clarkson has got a big job ahead of him to get North Melbourne back to where they should be. So next one now to mark them out of 10. I'll just give them a 1 really because obviously I expected them to to climb up the ladder. They didn't, and obviously it got a bunch of stars that have underperformed in the last 2 years and all that. So that's a 1 out of 10 from me. Now the players who now to talk about some of the players who started for them. Luke Davies-Uniacke flew a bit under the radar in the last 3 weeks of the season. Of course, these are again, my laptop's right there, so that's why I'm right here. So like some of these statistics, it's going so round 21 against Sydney. Of course, he had 30 disposals, 14 contested possessions, 5 tackles, 6 clearances. 5 of them were centre clearance, were from the centre, and 6 inside 50s, 509 metres gained, 9 scoring involvements, and of course 1 goal won. And then the next week he had probably his best game as an AFL player against the Adelaide Crows. He had a lazy 37 touches, 15 contested possessions, 3 tackles, 11 clearances, 8 of them from the centre, 10 inside 50s, 742 metres gained, 6 score involvements, and 1 goal won. So, but then he didn't have that big of a game in the final game against the Suns that he did in the last few weeks, but with the 26 touches and then the 7 clearances with the 3 from the centre, for example, and of course the 4 scoring involvements. But still, he actually did rather well, and obviously the averages from the first from the whole season as a whole compared to of course the last 3 games. Disposals, of course, this year he averaged 24 just under 25 per game, 25 touches a game. Throughout this period, he had 30. He averaged throughout this 3-game period, he averaged 31. So he stepped up a bit on that front. Contested possessions, he stepped up in the last 3 weeks as well. Strangely enough, he averaged 3.5 tackles per game in the last 3 weeks, but for the whole season he averaged just under 4.5. So he dropped a little bit in terms of the tackles, but then in other stats, obviously, like the clearances and inside 50s, the meters gained is the obvious one. I mean, he averaged 531 meters gained, and then compared throughout the whole season as a whole, he averaged 416.5. So the stats there showed that I think that LDU, I think if under Clarkson, I think he can be there. He can be more be their midfield trump card, I believe. I'm not saying that he is gonna be the guy who's gonna take over from Cunnington or Simpkin and just be the star for them in that midfield. But I think he can step up another gear, and maybe he can. I don't know if he's probably gonna contend for the best and fairest this year. Maybe contend next year as well. As I said, and then thrive under Clarkson, obviously, as well. So yeah. Another one who was actually pretty good this year was Nick Larkey. He's probably, I think, in my opinion, the most underrated key forward in the last couple of years. I think everyone's been talking about Mackay, Curnow, Hawkins, Cameron, yada yada yada. But no one's been talking about Nick Larkey. I mean, no one's remember he's kicked 80 goals in the last 2 seasons. He kicked 42 last year, and then he backed up with another 38 goals this year. With for the bottom side in the league, it is really impressive. Really, despite a slow start to his AFL career, of course, when he for 2 seasons after I think he was sort of delisted at the end of 2017, then came back in 2018, or maybe got injured. I think something like that. Didn't play at all in 2018. 2019, he in 2020 he played okay, but he wasn't. He didn't really get it. Of course, Ben Brown was in that team, and obviously he wasn't going to be the number one key forward in there. Now that Brown's gone, and he's really taken over in that number one full key forward role down at the Kangas, and I think he's really thrived. As I said, 80 goals in his last 2 seasons. That is pretty good going for Nick Larkey, and I hope that his growth continues, and I hope he has a big season in 2023. So yeah, and of course, Todd Goldstein, who's had a pretty not. I was pretty much around the middle season. He hasn't been that bad for his own standards, but he hasn't been great. Obviously, he hasn't been contending for All Australian. So pretty stock standard season, pretty much for Goldie. Ones who are under pressure, I think there's 2 of them really in. Jason Horne-Francis, I think I'm probably not going to be the only one that's saying this. I've been pretty disappointed by the way he's gone about it this year. I think maybe the tag of the number 1 draft pick. Some people, some players when they've gone in at number 1 have really thrived in it. I remember Andrew McGrath, Sam Walsh, the most recent ones. There, I think Jamara Ugle-Hagan, I believe he's really now starting to come into his own now. I think Horne-Francis probably in that range with, as I said, with Ugle-Hagan. And in a way of, he's gonna have his moments. He's gonna, like when we saw him last. But the difference is with Horne-Francis is when we all saw him in the Sandful. He teared the Sandful apart last year, and we all knew that he's gonna go pick 1 straight away. Unfortunately, he hasn't developed into that player. Obviously, it's obvious that Sandful football is very different than AFL football. But but the way he's gone about it has been a bit disappointing. Obviously, he's been dropped about a couple of times throughout this season, and obviously and then obviously throughout the season he put off contract talks, and there was rumours he was probably going to go back to South Australia. So, which I don't know. I think that has died down now. I think that has actually died down. For me, in terms of the rumours of Jason Horne-Francis to a South Australian club. I think that the one that was interested was the Crows, I believe, or probably that was the big talk of possibly him going there. And then another one is Cam Zurhaar. Of course, we all know what Cam Zurhaar can do on his day. He can be just about unstoppable, really, and simply breathtaking, really. There's rumours that Essendon are linked to him, and which broke about a few weeks ago. But I haven't heard any updates about that. So that's probably most likely not going to happen. But if it's true that Zerha does want to leave and goes to, of course, to Essendon, but it doesn't eventuate, then there is pressure on him to, to get trust back in the team, and then obviously fit into the plans with Clarko's plans, really. So yeah. So that is just about it, really. That is just about it, really. Of course, North Melbourne, 18th, 2 wins. And hopefully next year with Clarko at the helm, there will be hopefully there will be a meteoric rise, well, not meteoric rise, but a rise up the ladder for North Melbourne, and hopefully for the first time in years, they will climb up the ladder. Like this video, share to anybody who is an AFL fan or a North Melbourne fan. Comment down below what are your thoughts on North Melbourne season. Well, if you're a North Melbourne fan, what are your thoughts on the season, and what do you think of Clarko's of the acquisition of Alistair Clarkson? Anybody comment your thoughts on how he's going to go there. And one last thing, somewhere down there, click on the big red button which is named subscribe, labeled subscribe. So until next time, guys, I'll see you guys later, and wherever you may be, may the sun or the moon shine on you.